When I heard Vanessa's sarcastic laugh on the other end of the line, it felt like a bucket of ice water had been dumped over my head. "Oh, we already went last week," she said, using that condescending tone that always cut me to the core. It was just for the family. I had been calling to ask about the summer vacation, the very same trip I had paid for with $56,000 of my own savings. $56,000, so that my son, Michael, my daughter-in-law, Vanessa, and my 2 grandchildren could enjoy 2 weeks at a luxury resort in Maui. I had booked everything months in advance: the ocean view suites, the private island tours, and the reservations at the most exclusive 5-star restaurants. Everything was supposed to be perfect. Every detail was planned to create unforgettable family memories. But it turned out I wasn't included in those memories. They didn't even bother to tell me they were leaving. They simply left me behind, as if I were a stranger who had merely financed a vacation for people I didn't know. My name is Eleanor, and I am 64 years old. I have been a widow for 8 years, ever since my dear husband Arthur passed away. He left me alone, but he made sure I was left with the financial stability he had worked his whole life to build for me. Arthur was a forward-thinking man, hard-working and honest. For 40 years, we built a modest but solid estate together, a house that was fully paid off, well-invested savings, and the peace of mind knowing I would be taken care of when he was gone. I never imagined that this financial security would become my curse, the reason my own family would come to see me as nothing more than a walking ATM, an endless source of cash with no feelings or needs of my own. Michael is my only son. I finished raising him on my own after Arthur died, though he was already a 32-year-old man when we lost his father. He had always been a good son, affectionate, attentive, and respectful. Or at least, that is what I believed until he married Vanessa 6 years ago. From the very first day, she looked at me differently. It wasn't the warmth of a daughter-in-law wanting to join the family, but the calculating gaze of someone evaluating how much they could get out of me. I remember the wedding day perfectly. I paid for everything: the ballroom at the historic hotel, the dinner for 200 guests, the professional photographer, the 5-tier cake, the live band, and the imported flowers. I spent $42,000 on that wedding because I wanted my son to be happy, and I wanted them to start their marriage without a cent of debt or financial worry. Vanessa chose every single detail, from the linen napkins to the French champagne. It was always the most expensive option, always the most ostentatious. When I suggested more affordable alternatives, she looked at me as if I had insulted her honor. "It is my wedding, Eleanor. I am only getting married once in my life," she said in that sweet voice she used whenever she wanted to manipulate me. After the wedding, the requests kept coming. They needed a bigger place because Michael's apartment was too small. I gave them a down payment of $280,000 so they could buy a house in a gated community in a wealthy Chicago suburb that Vanessa insisted on. "It is for the children we will have, Eleanor. We want to raise them in a good school district," Michael explained with pleading eyes. How could I say no when it concerned my future grandchildren? Then they needed a new car because Michael's old sedan wasn't safe for a family. I bought them a $45,000 SUV. Next came the designer furniture, the 80-inch television, and the high-end kitchen appliances. Every time I visited their home, I saw the results of my money, but I never saw a genuine smile of gratitude, never felt a sincere hug, and never received an invitation to stay for dinner that wasn't followed by a new financial request. When my grandchildren were born, my beautiful grandkids whom I adore with all my heart, the situation only got worse. Vanessa stopped working. "A mother should be home with her children," she declared, as if it were an indisputable law of nature. Michael earned a good living as an engineer, but apparently, it wasn't enough to maintain the lifestyle Vanessa felt they deserved. The phone calls became more frequent. Private school tuition was $800 a month for each child. Then there were swimming lessons, piano classes, and elite soccer camps. They needed name-brand clothes because the children couldn't go to school looking like they were poor. There were expensive educational toys and birthday parties that grew more elaborate every year. I paid for it all. Every bill, every whim, every demand. I did it because I loved those children, because I wanted them to have every opportunity, and because a grandmother makes sacrifices for her grandkids. But the vacation was different. The vacation was the moment I finally opened my eyes and saw the truth I had been denying for years. I had planned that trip as a family celebration. I wanted to bring everyone together and create those special moments that stay in your heart forever. I booked a massive 5-bedroom villa, one for each couple, one for the kids, and one for myself. I hired private guides, paid for excursions, and left generous tips in advance. I was so excited, thinking about those 2 weeks by the ocean with my family. But 3 days before we were supposed to leave, Michael called me, his voice sounding uncomfortable. "Mom, about the trip. Vanessa thinks it would be better if just the 4 of us went this time. You know, just some family time for the 4 of us. You understand, right?" I didn't understand at all. But as I had done my whole life, I swallowed my pain and said yes. I said yes because that is what I always did. Agree, comply, sacrifice. My whole life, I was taught that a good mother, a good wife, and a good woman always puts others first. Arthur adored me, respected me, and valued me. But even with him, I was the one who gave in, the one who adapted my dreams to fit his, the one who postponed my desires so he could fulfill his own. I don't regret anything I did for Arthur, because he loved me genuinely. But now I see that the pattern of self-erasure I practiced for decades became the way I related to everyone, including my son and his wife. I became invisible. I became a presence that only mattered when a check needed to be signed. 2 weeks passed. 2 weeks during which I imagined my family enjoying the paradise beaches I had paid for, swimming in crystal blue waters, dining at gourmet restaurants, and laughing together under the Hawaiian sun. 2 weeks during which I sat alone in my house, looking at old photographs of when Michael was little, of when Arthur was still alive, and of when I was still someone important to the people I loved. I didn't get a single call during that time. Not one text message, not a single photo shared. Nothing. It was as if I didn't exist to them except when they needed something. When I finally gathered the courage to call and ask how the trip went, I heard that laugh, that damn sarcastic laugh from Vanessa that made me feel so small, so stupid, and so pathetic. "Oh, we already went last week. It was just for the family." Those 6 words contained so much contempt, so much calculated cruelty. She knew exactly what she was saying. She knew I had paid every single cent for that trip. She knew I had been deliberately excluded, and yet she had the nerve to laugh in my face, making it clear that I wasn't part of their family, that I was just the foolish old woman who signed the checks. I hung up the phone, my hands shaking. I sat on the living room sofa, the one where Arthur and I used to curl up and watch movies on Sunday nights, and I cried. I cried like I hadn't cried since my husband's funeral. But these tears were different. They weren't just tears of pure sadness. They were mixed with rage, with humiliation, and with a sense of betrayal so deep it physically hurt my chest. I had given everything, my money, my time, and my unconditional love. And all I got in return was contempt disguised as politeness, manipulation wrapped in sweet words, and exploitation justified by excuses about family and the grandkids. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed awake mentally, reviewing every situation, every request, every time I had said yes when I should have said no. I remembered the time Vanessa urgently needed $5,000 for a cosmetic procedure because a woman has to maintain her appearance. I remembered when Michael asked for $15,000 to cover credit card debt they had run up buying things they didn't need. I remembered the $12,000 I spent on a complete remodel of their kitchen because Vanessa insisted the old cabinets were depressing. I remembered the $8,000 in designer clothes for the kids, the $6,000 in electronics, and the $20,000 for that trip to Europe they took last year, which I also funded entirely and to which I was also not invited. I did the math that night. In 6 years of marriage, I had spent over $500,000 on them. That was more than half of everything Arthur had worked 40 years to leave for my security. And it wasn't just the money. It was the time I spent running errands for them, watching the kids whenever Vanessa felt like going out with her friends, cooking elaborate meals for their parties, and cleaning their house when they were too busy. It was my energy, my health, and my entire life revolving around their needs, while mine were eternally pushed to the background. The following days were strange. I didn't call Michael. I didn't send any messages. I didn't ask about the kids. I simply stayed in silence, processing everything, feeling something I hadn't been able to identify for years. Was it anger? Was it disappointment? Was it finally an awakening of my own crushed dignity? Martha, my neighbor and lifelong friend, noticed something was wrong. She came over with muffins and coffee, as she did every week, and found me sitting in the garden, staring at nothing. "Eleanor, what is going on? You look terrible," she told me with that genuine concern that only a true friend can show. And so, for the first time, I told her everything. I told her about the vacation, about the money, and about the years of feeling used and discarded. Martha listened in silence, her face shifting from surprise to indignation. When I finished talking, she took my hands in hers and said something I will never forget. "Eleanor, you have been their ATM for years. And the worst part is, they don't even say thank you. It is time for you to close that bank." She was right. I knew it in the depths of my soul. But saying no, setting boundaries, and standing up for my own worth were things I had never learned to do. I was raised in a generation where women sacrificed themselves without complaint, where being good meant erasing yourself for others. Changing that pattern at 64 seemed impossible. It seemed terrifying. But the alternative was worse. The alternative was to keep being invisible, to keep being exploited, and to keep giving away pieces of myself until there was nothing left. Weeks passed, weeks of silence. Michael called a few times, superficial conversations about the weather and the kids. He never mentioned the vacation. He never asked how I was really doing. Vanessa didn't call once, which was telling. She only contacted me when she needed something. And finally, 2 months after that humiliating phone call, my phone rang. It was Vanessa. "Hi, Eleanor," she said in that falsely cheerful voice she used right before asking for money. "The rent is overdue. Has the lady sent the money yet?" The lady. She called me the lady. As if I were a housekeeper. As if I were someone hired to serve them. As if my only purpose in this world was to transfer money to her bank account whenever she snapped her fingers. I felt something strange in that moment. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't the familiar pain I had grown used to. It was something new, something cold and crystal clear that settled in my chest. It was clarity. It was the absolute understanding that I meant nothing to this woman except a source of income. And in that instant, in that precise second, something inside me changed irreversibly. "It is just for the family, remember?" I replied with a calmness that surprised even me. My voice sounded different. It sounded firm. It sounded like the voice of someone who had finally found their backbone after years of being bent under the weight of others' expectations. There was silence on the other end of the line, a silence so thick I could almost feel Vanessa's confusion traveling through the phone waves. She didn't expect that. She expected my usual response, my automatic submission, my, "Of course, dear, I will transfer the money right away." "What did you say?" she finally asked. Her voice had lost all the fake sweetness and now sounded sharp, almost threatening. "I said it is just for the family. Those were your exact words when you excluded me from the vacation I paid for with $56,000 of my savings. So now, the money I have is also just for the family. My family. Me." I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking. My heart was beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. But for the first time in years, it wasn't fear I was feeling. It was power. It was the intoxicating sensation of having stood up for myself, of having said enough, of having set a clear and firm boundary. 10 minutes later, Michael called. His voice sounded tense and annoyed. "Mom, what did you say to Vanessa? She is very upset. She says you were rude to her." I took a deep breath. I told her the truth, Michael. I reminded her that you two excluded me from a vacation that I paid for entirely. And I informed her that I am not going to continue being your personal ATM. I heard Michael sigh with frustration. "Mom, don't be dramatic. You know Vanessa thought you would be more comfortable staying home. At your age, all that sun and heat isn't recommended. At my age, as if being 64 automatically made me an invalid, incapable of enjoying a vacation. As if my age were a valid excuse to exclude me and then expect me to keep paying for everything without complaining. Michael, I am 64 years old, not 90. I am perfectly capable of traveling. But that isn't the point. This is about respect. It is about the fact that you two have been using me for years, and I have allowed it because I didn't want to cause trouble. Because I wanted to be the perfect mother, the perfect grandmother. But no more. Using you? Mom, you are part of the family. Families help each other. His voice now sounded defensive, almost childish. Help is reciprocal, Michael. Son, I have given and given and given for 6 years. Over $500,000. Do you know how much money that is? It is more than half of everything your father worked for to keep me secure. And what have I received in return? Contempt, exclusion, phone calls only when you need money. You don't even invite me to dinner without asking for something in return. Michael stayed quiet. I could hear his breathing on the other end. Finally, he spoke, his voice softer but still annoyed. If that is how you feel, fine. You don't have to give us any more money. But don't treat us like we are criminals. Vanessa is offended. The kids are asking why Grandma doesn't come to visit anymore. That last part hurt. It hurt because I knew it was pure manipulation, using my grandkids as an emotional weapon. But it hurt anyway, because I loved them genuinely. You can bring the kids to visit me whenever you want, Michael. This is still their grandmother's house. But I am not going to your house to clean, cook, and babysit while Vanessa goes shopping with my credit cards. And I'm definitely not going to continue financing a lifestyle that you two cannot afford on your own. There was another long silence. Then Michael said something that chilled my blood. Fine, Mom, if that is how you want things. But remember that family is important. You wouldn't want to end up all alone in your old age. It was a veiled threat. He was threatening to abandon me, to keep my grandkids away from me, to leave me alone if I didn't keep opening my wallet every time they held out their hands. I hung up without responding. I sat on my bed, the bed I had shared with Arthur for 40 years, and I cried again. But these tears were different from the ones weeks ago. These tears were from rage, from helplessness, and from the terrible realization that my own son was emotionally blackmailing me. I didn't sleep at all that night. I stayed awake thinking about all the times I had justified their behavior, all the excuses I had invented to explain why they treated me that way. They are stressed with work, I told myself. Raising kids is hard, I repeated. Vanessa comes from a different kind of family. She has different expectations, I convinced myself. But the truth was much simpler and much more painful. They had turned me into an object. I was no longer a mother, a grandmother, or a person with feelings and needs. I was a resource that had to be kept just happy enough to keep giving, but not so happy that I would demand reciprocity or respect. The next morning, Martha came over early. She brought coffee and fresh-baked cinnamon rolls. She sat across from me at the kitchen table and looked at me with those wise eyes that have seen too much in life. "Tell me what happened," she said simply. And I told her everything. Vanessa's call, my response, the conversation with Michael, and the implicit threat to keep me away from my grandkids. Martha listened without interrupting, her expression turning more serious with every word. When I finished, she took my hands and spoke with a firmness that allowed no argument. "Eleanor, listen to me carefully. What they are doing is called financial abuse, and the emotional blackmail Michael used last night is pure manipulation. This is not going to end here. When people have been exploiting someone for years and suddenly that person says enough, they don't give up easily. They are going to escalate. They are going to try to make you feel guilty. They are going to use the children. They are going to invent emergencies. You need to prepare." "Prepare for what?" I asked, although deep down I already knew the answer. "For war, Eleanor. Because that is what this is going to be. A war for your money and your dignity. And you need to arm yourself with more than just good intentions. You need documentation, you need clear boundaries, and you probably need professional help." Martha was right. I knew it. But the idea of facing my own son in a legal battle, of having to defend myself as if I were a stranger, seemed surreal and devastating. "I know someone," Martha continued. "A lawyer who specializes in cases of financial abuse and elderly exploitation. His name is Robert Sterling. He is a good man, honest and direct. I think you should talk to him, just to know what your rights are and how to protect yourself." The idea of hiring a lawyer against my own family made me feel sick. But the alternative was to go back to being the silent victim, the exploited old woman who gives everything until she has nothing left. 3 days later, I was sitting in Robert's office. He was a man in his 50s, with graying hair at his temples and a look that conveyed both professionalism and genuine compassion. His office was simple but orderly, with shelves full of law books and diplomas framed on the cream-colored walls. He offered me coffee and sat across from me with a notepad and a recorder. "Eleanor, tell me everything from the beginning. Don't leave out any details, no matter how insignificant they may seem. In cases like these, every small detail can be important." I told him the whole story, from the wedding I paid for to the vacation I was excluded from. I told him about every bank transfer, every check signed, and every credit card I had given them that they ran up without limit. I told him about the house, the car, the furniture, the kids' private school, Vanessa's cosmetic treatments, the trips, the renovations, everything. Robert took notes meticulously, asking specific questions about dates, exact amounts, whether anything was in writing, and if there were any text messages or emails requesting money. When I finished, Robert laid his pen on the desk and looked at me with a seriousness that gave me a chill. "Miss Eleanor, what you are describing to me is a classic case of financial exploitation of a senior citizen. In many states, this is considered a crime. What they have done to you for 6 years has a legal name: family economic abuse. And your son's threats regarding keeping you from your grandchildren constitute emotional coercion." Hearing those words said out loud by a professional made it all more real, more serious, and more painful. It wasn't just my hurt feelings. It wasn't just family drama. It was abuse with a legal name. "What can I do?" I asked with a trembling voice. Robert leaned back in his chair and began to explain. "First, we need to document everything. I want you to gather every bank statement from the last 6 years, every transfer receipt, and every text message or email where they asked for money. We need to build a complete record of how much you have given and under what circumstances. Second, we are going to draft a formal letter notifying your son and daughter-in-law that you will no longer be providing financial support. This letter will be legally recorded and will serve as evidence that you clearly communicated your boundaries. Third, I am going to recommend that you consult with a psychologist who specializes in family abuse. Her name is Dr. Sarah Miller. She can help you process all of this emotionally and can also provide a professional evaluation of your mental state, which will be important if they try to argue that you are senile or unable to handle your own finances. My head was spinning with all this information. Do you think they will go that far? Do you think my own son will try to have me declared incompetent? Robert nodded slowly. "Eleanor, I have seen similar cases dozens of times. When people have been financially dependent on someone for years and that source is cut off, they can become desperate, and desperate people do unthinkable things. Your son might not do it on his own, but your daughter-in-law seems to be the driving force behind all of this. She isn't going to give up easily." I left that office with a folder full of documents to sign and a task list that seemed endless. I had to go through 6 years of bank statements, organize receipts, and look for old emails. I had to make an appointment with Dr. Miller. I had to sign authorizations so Robert could represent me legally if the situation escalated. It was overwhelming. It was terrifying. But it was also necessary. That night, while I was going through my bank files on the computer, I found things I had forgotten or that I had blocked from my memory. A $3,000 transfer with a note saying medical emergency for Vanessa, which turned out to be a nose job. $4,000 for car repairs that I discovered later on Facebook were actually luxury rims and a premium sound system. $7,500 for urgent school expenses that matched the exact dates Vanessa posted photos from a weekend at a luxury spa. Every discovery was like a slap in the face. They had lied. Over and over again, they had lied about what they needed the money for. And I, trusting and foolish, had believed every word without questioning anything. I printed it all, every statement, every transfer, every note. By the end of the night, I had a stack of papers nearly 4 inches high. $537,000. Exactly. That was the total sum of what I had spent on them over 6 years. More than many people earn in their entire working lives. The next morning, I received a text message from Michael. "Mom, we need to talk. Vanessa is very upset with your attitude. The kids are asking why you don't come to see them. This is getting out of control. Come to dinner tonight and we will fix everything like adults." I read that message several times. The manipulation was so obvious, it was almost insulting. Use the kids as bait. Make me look like the guilty one, with that line about my attitude. Suggest that I was the immature one, while they were the reasonable adults. I responded simply, "No thank you, Michael. If you want the kids to see their grandmother, you can bring them to my house any afternoon. But I am not going to your house to be attacked by Vanessa or to listen to more demands for money." The response came almost immediately. "Unbelievable. After everything we have done for you, after all the times we have included you in our family, this is how you pay us back. Distancing yourself from your own grandkids out of pride." I stared at that message for long minutes. Everything they had done for me? What exactly had they done for me except take and take and take, include me in their family? They had excluded me from the vacation I paid for. I didn't respond. Martha had advised me to keep all communications brief and documented, and not to let myself be dragged into emotional arguments over text. 2 days later, I had my first session with Dr. Miller, the psychologist Robert had recommended. She was a woman in her mid-40s, with a warm but professional presence. Her office was decorated in soft peach tones, and there were green plants in every corner. I sat on a comfortable sofa across from her, and for the third time in 2 weeks, told my whole story. Dr. Miller listened intently, making occasional notes and nodding with understanding. When I finished, she leaned forward and spoke with a gentleness that almost made me cry. "Eleanor, I want you to understand something very important. None of this is your fault. You have been a victim of a pattern of abuse that is more common than people think. Many seniors, especially women of your generation who were raised to be unconditional givers, end up in similar situations. They have conditioned you for years to believe that your value is in what you can give, not in who you are as a person." Her words hit me like a hammer. She was right. My whole life, I had measured my value by my utility. I was a good wife because I took good care of Arthur. I was a good mother because I sacrificed for Michael. I tried to be a good grandmother by giving everything I could. But who was I beyond those roles? What value did Eleanor have as a person, not as a provider of services or money? "We are going to work together to rebuild your sense of identity and self-worth," Dr. Miller continued. "I am also going to prepare a complete psychological evaluation documenting that you are in full possession of your mental faculties. Because based on what you have told me about the implicit threats, I suspect they are going to try to question your ability to handle your own finances. We need to have professional documentation showing that you are completely competent." I left that session feeling strangely hopeful, but also emotionally exhausted. Dr. Miller had given me homework to write a list of all the things I wanted to do with my life, my time, and my money. Things I had postponed for years because I was always busy attending to others' needs. That night, I sat down with a blank notebook and a pen, but my mind was empty. I had spent so much time living for others that I honestly didn't know what I wanted for myself. 3 weeks of relative silence passed. Michael sent occasional messages, all in the same tone of an offended victim. "The kids miss their grandmother. Vanessa is hurt by your rejection. I don't understand why you are acting this way." I responded briefly and neutrally, not letting myself get dragged into arguments. Robert had taught me that every message could be used as evidence, so I kept everything cordial but firm. Meanwhile, I had gathered all the financial documentation, 6 thick folders full of bank statements, receipts, transfers, and text messages asking for money. It was irrefutable evidence of 6 years of systematic exploitation. Dr. Miller and I met twice a week. In each session, I discovered deeper layers of my own self-erasure. She had me keep a journal where I wrote down every time I said yes when I wanted to say no, every time I postponed my needs for others, and every time I felt guilty just for existing without being useful. The pages filled up quickly. It was terrifying to see in black and white how completely I had disappeared from my own life. Dr. Miller also completed my psychological evaluation. The results were clear. I was in perfect use of my mental faculties, with no signs of cognitive decline, and completely capable of making financial and personal decisions. One afternoon, while I was having tea in my garden, I heard the doorbell. It was strange because I wasn't expecting any visitors. Martha usually knocked on the back door directly. I went to open it and found myself face to face with Vanessa. She was elegantly dressed in an emerald green suit that probably cost $1,000, high heels, and perfect makeup. She smiled at me, but it was that fake smile that never reached her eyes. "Hello, Eleanor. Can we talk?" I didn't invite her in. I stood in the doorway, blocking the entrance with my body. "What do you want to talk about, Vanessa?" She sighed dramatically, as if I were a difficult child testing her patience. "About this ridiculous situation. I know you were upset about the vacation. Maybe we didn't handle things well, but this has gone way too far. Michael is stressed, the kids are confused, and frankly, you are being selfish." Selfish. She called me selfish. After 6 years of giving her more than $500,000, of caring for her children, of cooking for her family, and of constantly sacrificing my own needs. "Vanessa, I have nothing to discuss with you. If Michael wants to talk to me, he can call or come over himself. But this conversation is over." I tried to close the door, but she put her foot in the way, blocking it. "Not so fast, Eleanor." Her voice had lost all pretense of sweetness. It now sounded hard, almost threatening. "Let's get one thing straight. You owe us. Michael is your only son. Those grandkids are your only family. If you want to keep being part of their lives, you are going to have to reconsider your attitude. We need money. The mortgage is late, the school tuitions are due in 2 weeks, and we have bills to pay. You can't just cut off all support without consequences." I felt my heart race, but I kept my voice calm. "Take your foot out of my door, Vanessa. Now." She looked at me with contempt. "Or what? Are you going to call the police? That would be an interesting story. Confused old woman calls the police on her own family who just wanted to visit." There it was, the threat Robert had predicted, trying to make me look senile, incapable, and confused. "My foot, Vanessa. Now." This time my voice sounded firmer. She finally moved her foot with an exaggerated and dramatic motion. "Fine. But this isn't over. Eleanor, we are going to get what is ours. Michael is going to talk to a lawyer about his rights as your sole heir, and we are going to prove that you are no longer in a condition to handle your own money. You are clearly confused, paranoid, and probably in the early stages of dementia." I slammed the door in her face and locked it. My hands were shaking violently. I leaned against the door, breathing deeply, trying to calm my heart, which was beating as if it wanted to jump out of my chest. Martha had been right. They had escalated. Now they were threatening to legally question my mental capacity so they could control my money. I grabbed my phone and called Robert immediately. "Vanessa was just here," I told him when he answered. "She threatened that they are going to try to have me declared mentally incompetent to handle my finances." I heard Robert take a sharp breath. Was the conversation recorded? "No, I didn't think of it. It's okay. From now on, I want you to record any interaction with them. Your phone has a voice recording function. Use it. And send me an email right now with all the details of what just happened while it's still fresh in your memory. Date, time, what exactly she said, everything." That night, I wrote down every word I remembered from the conversation with Vanessa. I also began to feel real fear. This wasn't just a family dispute anymore. They were preparing to attack me legally, to take away control of my own money and my own life. The next day, Robert sent the formal letter he had drafted. It was a legal document notifying Michael and Vanessa that I was ceasing all financial support immediately, that any previous debts were considered gifts and not loans, and that any future contact regarding economic matters must be through my legal representative. The response came 4 days later, but not from Michael. It arrived as a certified letter from a law firm. My heart sank when I saw the envelope. Robert was with me when I opened it. The letter was brutal in its legal coldness. It essentially argued that Michael, as my only son and heir, had legitimate concerns about his mother's mental and financial well-being. They cited my recent erratic behavior, my social isolation, and my questionable financial decision-making. They requested a mental competency evaluation by a court-appointed physician. "This is war," Robert said while reading the letter a second time. They are playing dirty. But we have the advantage. You have Dr. Miller's evaluation proving your complete mental competence. You have documentation of 6 years of financial abuse. And you have the fact that your decision to cut off financial support is not erratic. It is completely rational given the pattern of exploitation. He prepared me for what was to come. We would have to respond legally. There would likely be a hearing. I would have to testify. It would be public, painful, and humiliating. That night, I cried until I had no more tears. How had it come to this? How had my life gone from being a loving mother and a happy grandmother to defending myself in court against my own son? Martha stayed with me that night, slept in the guest room, made me chamomile tea, and held me while I cried. You are stronger than you think, Eleanor, and you are not alone in this. The following days were a whirlwind of legal preparation. Robert and I met with an independent doctor who performed another complete cognitive evaluation. I spent 4 hours answering questions, solving puzzles, and demonstrating my memory, reasoning skills, and mental competence. The results were identical to Dr. Miller's. I was in perfect use of my faculties. The doctor even commented that my mental acuity was above average for my age. Meanwhile, Michael began a smear campaign. He called my few close friends, suggesting that I was acting strangely, that I was confused, and that maybe I needed help. Some of those friends, people I had known for decades, called me out of concern. I explained the real situation and showed them the documentation of the financial abuse. Most believed me and supported me, but some, especially the older and more traditional ones, told me I was being harsh, that family comes first, and that I should forgive and forget. One afternoon, I received an unexpected visit. It was a social worker from Adult Protective Services. Someone had made an anonymous report expressing concern for my well-being. The social worker, a young woman named Patricia, was kind but professional. She inspected my home, asked me questions about my daily routine, and evaluated whether I was being neglected or abused. I showed her all my legal documentation, the medical evaluations, and the evidence of the financial abuse I had suffered. Patricia sat with me at the kitchen table and spoke honestly. Miss Eleanor, I see cases like this more often than people imagine. Families who exploit their elderly members financially, and then, when that person stands up for themselves, try to make them look incompetent. You are clearly in full use of your faculties. Your house is clean and well maintained. You are well cared for and have solid documentation of what has been happening. I am going to close this case as unfounded. It was a small relief, but it also made me realize how far Michael and Vanessa were willing to go. They had used social services as a weapon against me. What would come next? The answer came faster than I expected. A week after Patricia's visit, I received another certified letter. This time it wasn't from Michael's lawyers. It was from my grandchildren's private school. The letter, written in formal and distant language, informed me that my name had been removed from the list of people authorized to pick up the children. I was also notified that I was no longer welcome at school events unless accompanied by the parents. The reason cited was vague. At the request of the legal guardians due to family concerns, they were systematically isolating me from my grandkids. It was a cruel tactic, but an effective one. It hurt more than any legal threat ever could. Those children were innocent in all of this. They loved me genuinely, and I loved them. Using that love as a weapon was the lowest act Michael and Vanessa could commit. I called Robert immediately. His voice sounded tense when I explained the situation. They are building a narrative. They want to show that you are a threat or an unstable influence on the children. It is part of their strategy to prove mental incompetence. That night, while I was sitting alone in my living room, I heard voices outside. I looked out the window and saw Michael and Vanessa at my front door, accompanied by a man I didn't recognize. He was wearing a gray suit and carrying a leather portfolio. My instinct told me not to open the door, but they rang the bell insistently. Finally, with my phone in hand and ready to record, I opened the door but kept the security chain on. "Mom, we need to talk," Michael said. His voice sounded tired, almost pleading. "This is Dr. Mark Sterling. He is a psychiatrist. Vanessa and I are very worried about you. We have noticed changes in your behavior, irrational decisions, and paranoia. Doctor, Sterling has agreed to evaluate you. I looked at the man in the gray suit. He smiled at me in a condescending way, as if I were a scared child who needed to be calmed down. Miss Eleanor, it will only be a few simple questions, nothing to worry about. I discreetly activated the voice recording on my phone. I am not going to be evaluated by any doctor you bring here. I have already been evaluated by 2 independent professionals, and both confirmed that I am in perfect use of my mental faculties. If you have legitimate concerns, you can present them through your lawyers, and I will respond through mine. Now, please, leave my property. Michael looked frustrated. Mom, please, we are only trying to help you. Can't you see that your behavior is affecting the whole family? Vanessa stepped in, her voice full of barely contained venom. Stop being stubborn, Eleanor. You are sick. You can't see clearly. You need professional help. Doctor, Sterling can help you, but only if you cooperate. Dr. Sterling took a step forward. Ma'am, I understand this may seem invasive, but your family has valid reasons for concern. Social isolation, sudden changes in established behavior patterns, and distrust toward loved ones are all signs of possible cognitive decline. I felt rage boiling in my chest. This man didn't even know me. He hadn't reviewed my medical history and had no real basis for those claims. He was there because Michael and Vanessa were likely paying him to diagnose me as incompetent. Dr. Sterling, I don't know how much they are paying you for this, but I suggest you verify your facts before making irresponsible diagnoses about a person you have never examined. Now, you all have 10 seconds to get off my property before I call the police. I slammed the door and locked it. I heard them arguing outside for a few minutes. Then I heard their footsteps fading away. My hands were shaking as I sent the full recording of the conversation to Robert. He replied in minutes. Perfect. This clearly shows they are trying to manipulate a medical evaluation. Dr. Sterling just committed an ethical violation by attempting to diagnose you without a formal evaluation. I am going to file a complaint with the medical board. The following days were filled with constant tension. Every time the phone rang, every time I heard a car park near my house, my heart raced. I was living in a state of hypervigilance that was exhausting me physically and emotionally. Martha became my anchor. She came over every day, sometimes just to sit with me in silence, other times to make me laugh with stories of her own family battles. She constantly reminded me that I was doing the right thing, that defending my dignity wasn't selfish, it was survival. In my next session with Dr. Miller, I finally broke down. I sobbed with deep cries that came from somewhere dark inside me. I can't take it anymore, I told her through tears. He is my son, my only son. How can he be doing this to me? What did I do wrong in raising him for him to become this person? Dr. Miller handed me a box of tissues and waited patiently for me to calm down before speaking. Eleanor, listen to me carefully. You didn't raise this person. The person Michael is right now is being controlled and manipulated by Vanessa. I have seen this pattern many times. There is a dominant spouse who isolates the other from their family of origin, who controls the finances, and who dictates how relationships should be. Michael is probably so deeply manipulated that he can't even see clearly what is happening. Her words made sense, but they didn't ease the pain. And what about my grandkids? I asked. They are going to grow up thinking their grandmother is a bad, crazy woman who abandoned them. They are going to grow up with the lies Vanessa tells them about me. Dr. Miller sighed. Possibly, but there is also the possibility that when they grow up and can think for themselves, they will seek the truth. Children are more perceptive than we think. Eventually, they will see their mother's pattern of behavior, and when that happens, you will have the chance to rebuild that relationship. But for now, your priority must be to protect yourself. Robert, meanwhile, was preparing our legal defense. The hearing to evaluate my mental competence was scheduled for 3 weeks away. It would be in front of a judge, with testimony from both sides. Michael's lawyers would present their case, arguing that I needed a legal guardian to handle my finances. We would present evidence of my full competence and the systematic financial abuse I had suffered. It's going to be tough, Robert warned me. They are going to attack your character. They are going to paint every decision you have made recently as evidence of mental decline. They will bring witnesses who will say you have become paranoid, isolated, and confused. We have to be prepared to refute every one of those arguments with solid evidence. We spent hours preparing. Robert asked me difficult questions, pressed me on details, and prepared me for the aggressive cross-examination I would face. One afternoon, 2 weeks before the hearing, I was at the grocery store buying supplies when I saw Michael. He was alone, without Vanessa. Our eyes met across the dairy aisle. For a moment, I saw something in his expression, something that looked like genuine pain, maybe even regret. He walked toward me slowly. "Mom," he said in a low voice, "can we talk? Just you and me. No lawyers, no Vanessa, please." I looked at my son, this 40-year-old man who was once my baby, my little boy, my teenager. I searched his face for any trace of the Michael I knew, of the affectionate and good son he had been before Vanessa. "What do you want to talk about, Michael?" He looked around nervously, as if he feared someone was listening to us. "Not here. Can we go to your house? Just half an hour. I'm begging you." Part of me wanted to say no, to maintain the boundaries that had cost me so much to establish. But he was my son. Despite everything, he was still my son. "All right, half an hour, but I am going to record the conversation." He nodded, his expression defeated. We finished our shopping in silence, and then he followed me to my house in his car. We sat in the living room, across from each other. I had my phone on the table between us, the recorder activated and visible. Michael stared at his hands, his fingers interlaced nervously. He looked tired, with deep circles under his eyes and a paleness I hadn't noticed before. Finally, he looked up and spoke with a trembling voice. "Mom, I don't know how to start. I don't know how to explain all this without sounding like a complete coward." "Try being honest," I told him simply. He nodded and took a deep breath. "Vanessa is putting a lot of pressure on me. Since you stopped giving us money, she has been obsessed with getting it somehow. She doesn't sleep at night. She makes lists of expenses, she calculates how much we need, and she gets hysterical when I tell her we can't ask you for more. I tried to explain to her that you have a right to your own money, that we can't keep depending on you. But she says I am weak, that I don't stand up for my family." I listened without interrupting, observing how he finally seemed to be seeing reality clearly. "She was the one who contacted that lawyer," Michael continued. "I didn't want to. When she showed me the letter they were going to send, I told her it was too much, that we were crossing a line. But she convinced me it was for our own good, for the good of the kids. She made me believe that you really might be sick, that your change in behavior was a symptom of something serious." "And what do you believe, Michael?" I asked. "Do you believe I am sick? Do you believe I have lost the ability to make my own decisions?" He shook his head, tears starting to roll down his cheeks. "No, Mom. I know you aren't sick. I know you are completely sane. And I know we have abused your generosity for years. God, when I saw all those numbers the lawyer gathered, when I saw how much money we have taken from you, I felt sick. Over $500,000. How did I let it go so far? Because Vanessa manipulates you," I answered calmly. "And because I allowed it by being unable to say no. We both have responsibility in this, Michael. But the difference is that I am trying to change. I am setting boundaries. I am defending myself. What are you doing?" He covered his face with his hands. "I don't know. I'm trapped. If I take your side, Vanessa is going to go crazy. She will make my life impossible. She already threatened to divorce me, take the kids, and ruin my reputation." There was the truth. Michael wasn't just an ungrateful son or a greedy man. He was a victim too, trapped in an abusive relationship with a manipulative and controlling woman. "Michael, listen to me. I can't save your marriage. I can't rescue you from Vanessa. That is something you have to decide for yourself. But what I can tell you is that I am not going to let them drag me into court, question my mental health, or keep me from my grandkids just because Vanessa wants control of my money." "I know," he whispered, "and I don't blame you. If I were in your place, I would probably do the same thing. Mom, I came here to tell you something important. That doctor, Sterling, we brought last week, Vanessa paid him $5,000 in advance to diagnose you with dementia, regardless of the results of any evaluation." I overheard the conversation. She told him exactly what to write in the report. My blood ran cold. "You have proof of that?" Michael nodded slowly. I recorded the conversation on my phone. I don't know why I did it. I guess some part of me knew this was wrong, that we had crossed a line we couldn't cross. He pulled out his phone and showed me an audio file. You can give it to your lawyer. It's evidence of fraud. It could completely ruin our case. Why are you telling me this, Michael? Why are you giving me this evidence? He looked at me with eyes full of pain and shame. Because you are my mother. Because despite everything that has happened, I still love you. And because I can't live with myself if I let them destroy you just to maintain a lifestyle we never should have had. Vanessa is going to hate me when she finds out. She will probably end our marriage, but I'd rather have that than betray you this way. I felt tears burning in my eyes. This was my son. The real Michael was there, under all the layers of manipulation and fear. Send me that file now, I told him. He did it immediately. My phone buzzed with the received message. Michael, you need professional help. You need therapy to get out of this toxic relationship. Dr. Miller, my psychologist, can recommend someone who specializes in abusive relationships. I've already looked for help, he admitted. I started therapy 2 weeks ago without Vanessa knowing. My therapist says I am in a relationship of emotional and financial abuse. She says Vanessa shows patterns of a narcissistic personality. She says I need to get out before it's too late. I looked at him with a mix of sadness and hope. And what are you going to do? I'm going to ask for a divorce, he said with a firm voice. I've already contacted a family lawyer. I'm going to fight for joint custody of the kids. I'm not going to let her use them as weapons against you or me. And I'm going to withdraw my name from that incompetency lawsuit. I'm going to send a sworn statement to the court explaining that I was pressured by my wife, that the allegations have no real basis, and that you are completely competent. I couldn't believe it. After weeks of a nightmare, there was finally a ray of light. Michael, this is going to be very hard for you. Vanessa isn't going to give up easily. He nodded. I know. But I have to do it. For me, for the kids, and for you. I've already asked my boss to temporarily transfer me to the office in another city. I'm going to move with the kids while I process the divorce. I need physical distance from Vanessa to be able to think clearly. We stayed in silence for a few moments. Then Michael spoke again. Mom, I know I can't give you back the money we took. I know it's going to take me years, maybe decades, to even begin to compensate you. But I want you to know that I'm going to try. I don't expect your immediate forgiveness. I only hope that someday you can see me as your son again and not as one of your abusers. I stood up and walked toward him. I hugged him while he sobbed against my shoulder like he used to when he was a little boy and got hurt playing. You are always going to be my son, Michael. Always. And the fact that you are here, that you are making these difficult decisions, and that you are choosing what is right over what is easy, tells me that the son I raised is still there. He was just lost for a while. After Michael left, I immediately called Robert and sent him the recording Michael had given me. I heard the silence on the other end when he finished listening. Then a dry, disbelieving laugh. Eleanor, this is pure legal gold. This doesn't just destroy their case. This could lead to criminal charges against Vanessa and Dr. Sterling for fraud and attempted illegal control of another person's assets. Are you sure you want to go that far? I thought about it carefully. Part of me wanted to see Vanessa face real consequences for everything she had done. But another part, the part that still loved my grandkids, knew that if their mother went to prison, they would suffer. I want to use it as a defense in the hearing. I want it to be clear that I am competent and that all of this was a fraud from the start. But regarding criminal charges, let me think about it. The following days were chaotic. Michael kept his word and sent a sworn statement retracting all allegations of incompetence. His lawyer filed documents withdrawing him from the case. Vanessa tried to continue alone, but without Michael's testimony as the concerned son, her case was falling apart. She hired another lawyer, spending money she didn't have on legal fees, becoming more and more desperate. A week before the scheduled hearing, I received a call from Vanessa's lawyer requesting a meeting to discuss a settlement. Robert and I went to that meeting prepared for anything. Vanessa was there, sitting next to her lawyer, wearing an orange dress that she had likely once bought with my money. She looked furious, but also scared. Her lawyer, an older man named Daniel, spoke first. My client is willing to withdraw all allegations and close the case if Miss Eleanor agrees to certain conditions. Robert leaned back in his chair. "We are listening." Daniel pulled out a document. First, that Miss Eleanor does not press criminal charges related to the incident with Dr. Sterling. Robert looked at the document with a blank expression. "And what else?" Daniel continued reading. "Second, that Miss Eleanor provide a sum of $50,000 as transition assistance for my client, who is facing financial difficulties due to the separation from her husband." I laughed. I couldn't help it. It was a bitter laugh, full of absolute disbelief. "Are you asking me to pay the woman who tried to rob me, who tried to have me declared insane, who kept me from my grandkids, and who manipulated my son for years?" That is her settlement offer. Vanessa finally spoke, her voice dripping with barely contained venom. "You owe me that, and much more, Eleanor. I spent 6 years caring for your grandkids, maintaining a house that you visited constantly, cooking for you, and including you in our family. That is worth money. And now, because of you, my marriage is destroyed, my children are confused, and I am facing financial ruin." Robert raised a hand before I could respond. "Miss Vanessa, I suggest you be very careful with your words. We have a recorded conversation of you attempting to bribe a doctor to falsely diagnose my client with dementia. We have documentation of over $500,000 that you extracted from my client over 6 years. We have text messages where you demand money with abusive and threatening language. If anyone owes money here, it is not my client." Vanessa's face turned red with fury. "Those recordings were obtained illegally. Michael had no right to record me without my consent." Robert smiled coldly. "In this state, only one party's consent in a conversation is required for the recording to be legal. Michael was part of that conversation. The recording is completely admissible in court, but let's set that aside for a moment. Let's talk about our counteroffer." He pulled out his own folder and placed it on the table. "My client is willing not to press criminal charges under the following conditions. 1. You sign a document acknowledging that all allegations of mental incompetence were false and motivated by financial interests. 2. You agree never to contact Miss Eleanor again, except for absolutely necessary coordination regarding the grandchildren, and all communication must be through Michael. 3. You sign a mutual restraining order that prohibits any unauthorized approach. 4. You agree to attend mandatory therapy to address your manipulative behavior patterns. And 5. You waive any future claims to Miss Eleanor's estate." Daniel read the document, his expression becoming more serious with every clause. Vanessa looked like she was going to explode. "This is ridiculous. I am not signing any of this. I'd rather go to trial. I'm going to expose all your secrets, Eleanor. I'm going to tell how you neglected Michael when he was a child, how you always made him feel inadequate, and how your husband cheated on you for years and you allowed it because you were too weak to leave him." I felt as if I had been slapped. The lies came out of her mouth so easily, so naturally. Robert spoke before I could react. "Miss Vanessa, are you aware that defamation is a civil offense? Every false word you just said can be used against you, and I assure you it will be." He stood up from his chair. "This meeting is over, Mr. Daniel. If your client wants to go to trial, we will be happy to present all our evidence publicly, including the recordings, the bank statements, the testimony from medical professionals, and Michael's testimony. We will see you in court." We left that office, and I was shaking with rage and pain. Vanessa's words kept echoing in my head, vicious lies designed to hurt me at my core. Robert put a hand on my shoulder. "Breathe, Eleanor. That was a last desperate attempt at manipulation. She knows she lost. That's why she is attacking so savagely. Wounded animals are the most dangerous." The hearing finally arrived. It was a gray November morning. Martha accompanied me to court, holding my hand as we entered the building. The courtroom was intimidating, with high ceilings and dark wood walls. Vanessa was there with Daniel, sitting on the other side of the room. She didn't even look at me when I walked in. Michael wasn't present, which was for the best. He had already given his written statement and didn't have to subject himself to the circus this had become. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Judge Sonia Ramirez. She had a serious but not unfriendly expression. She reviewed the documents in front of her for several minutes before speaking. "I have read all the documents presented by both parties. I must say, this is one of the most disturbing cases I have seen in my 25 years on the bench. Miss Vanessa, has your lawyer explained the gravity of the accusations against you? Vanessa stood up. Her voice sounded small in the large room. Yes, Your Honor, the judge continued. I have evidence here of a documented attempt to bribe a medical professional to obtain a false diagnosis. I have evidence of the systematic extraction of over $500,000 from a senior citizen over a 6-year period. I have evidence of threats, emotional coercion, and the use of minors as weapons in a financial dispute. Do you have anything to say in your defense? Daniel stood up. Your Honor, my client admits there were errors in judgment. She is willing to retract all allegations and accept the conditions proposed by the defense, with the exception of mandatory therapy, which she considers an invasion of her privacy. The judge stared at him. Mr. Daniel, your client is lucky I am not ordering a full criminal investigation. Mandatory therapy is not negotiable. In fact, I am going to add additional conditions. She turned toward Vanessa. You are going to sign everything Miss Eleanor has requested, without modifications. Additionally, I am ordering that any shared custody you have with your children include professional supervision for the first 6 months, given the pattern of manipulative behavior you have shown. I am ordering a full psychological evaluation performed by a court-appointed professional, and I am establishing a permanent restraining order that prohibits you from coming within 100 yards of Miss Ita. Eleanor, except in situations specifically related to the grandchildren, and always with mediation present. Vanessa looked devastated, but she said nothing. The judge then addressed me. Miss Eleanor, I have reviewed your medical and psychological evaluations. It is more than clear that you are in full possession of your mental faculties. In fact, you show remarkable mental acuity for your age. The allegations of incompetence were completely unfounded and, frankly, abusive. This case is closed. Legal costs will be paid by the plaintiff. It was as if a massive weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I had won. Not just legally, but morally. The truth had come out. My competence had been validated, and Vanessa had been exposed for who she really was. We left the court under a sky that had begun to clear. Martha hugged me tight. You did it. I am so proud of you. Robert shook my hand with a genuine smile. Eleanor, it was an honor to represent you. You are one of the bravest women I have ever met. That night, Michael called me. His voice sounded relieved. Mom, I just got the notice from the court. Thank you for not pressing criminal charges. I know Vanessa doesn't deserve it, but my kids don't deserve to have their mother in prison. I told him the truth. I didn't do it for her, Michael. I did it for them, and I did it for you. Because despite everything, you are still my son, and I don't want your children to grow up with that trauma. I am in intensive therapy, he told me, twice a week. My therapist says it's going to take time to undo years of manipulation, but I am committed to the process. And the kids are in play therapy too. They are confused about everything that has happened, but slowly they are understanding that none of this was your fault or mine. It was Vanessa who created this chaos. The following months were a time of slow but steady healing. Michael and I began to rebuild our relationship, this time on a healthier foundation. He insisted on paying me something every month, even if it was a small amount. It isn't about the money, Mom. It's about my dignity. I need to feel like I am doing the right thing. I accepted because I understood it was part of his recovery process, of regaining his self-esteem after years of being controlled. The kids started visiting me again. At first, the visits were short and supervised, with Michael always present. But gradually, as the therapy progressed and they processed everything that had happened, the visits became more natural and more joyful. One Saturday afternoon, my oldest grandson hugged me tight and whispered in my ear, "Grandma, I'm sorry Mom did bad things to you. I love you so much." My heart broke and mended at the same time with those words. Vanessa complied with the court order. She attended therapy, kept her distance, and communicated only through Michael when absolutely necessary. According to Michael, she was still resentful and still blamed me for the destruction of her marriage. But at least she had learned to keep that resentment to herself. The divorce was finalized 6 months after the hearing. Michael obtained joint custody, and I regained my place in my grandchildren's lives. But the greatest transformation happened in me. I continued working with Dr. Miller on rebuilding my sense of identity beyond being a mother, grandmother, and provider. I started doing things I had postponed for decades. I signed up for watercolor painting classes at the community center. I discovered I had a talent for capturing landscapes and mixing colors in ways that expressed emotions I didn't know I had buried inside. My first small exhibition at a local coffee shop sold 3 paintings. It wasn't the money that mattered. It was the validation that I had worth beyond my bank account. Martha and I started traveling together. Nothing extravagant, just weekend getaways to nearby towns, craft markets, and quiet beaches. Trips that I paid for with my own money, for my own enjoyment, without guilt and without the feeling that I should be saving that money to give to someone else. On one of those trips, sitting on a terrace watching the sunset over the lake, Martha told me, "Look how far you've come, Eleanor. A year ago, you were shattered, feeling invisible. Now look at you, you're glowing." She was right. I felt different. I walked differently. I talked differently. And I looked different when I saw myself in the mirror. I had recovered something I had lost a long time ago. My own voice. I was no longer the woman who said yes to everything to keep the peace. I was the woman who said no when necessary, who set boundaries, and who stood up for herself. And surprisingly, the world didn't fall apart when I started prioritizing myself. In fact, the relationships that mattered grew stronger. A year after the hearing, on a perfect autumn afternoon, I was in my garden painting the lavender flowers I had planted when Michael called. "Mom, can I stop by with the kids? We want to show you something." They arrived half an hour later. The kids ran to me with drawings they had made at school. Michael was carrying a small box wrapped in gift paper. "It's for you, from the 3 of us." I opened the box carefully. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a heart-shaped charm. On one side was engraved, "Brave Grandma," and on the other, "We love you." Tears rolled down my cheeks as Michael explained. "The kids chose the design. They wanted you to know that you are their hero, that you taught them it's okay to stand up for yourself, it's okay to say no, and it's okay to love yourself. And I wanted you to know that I am proud of you. I know the road has been tough, and I know there are still difficult days. But Mom, you saved me. By saving yourself, you saved me too." In that moment, I fully understood the meaning of everything that had happened. It hadn't just been about the money. It had never been just about the money. It had been about dignity, about self-worth, and about teaching by example that loving someone doesn't mean disappearing for them. That being generous doesn't mean allowing abuse. That setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's survival. I thought about all the women of my generation who had been taught to give until they had nothing left to give, who measured their worth by how much they could sacrifice. I thought about how many were in situations similar to what I had lived, being exploited by their own families, feeling trapped between love and self-preservation. And I wished with all my heart that they too would find the courage to stand up for themselves, to say enough, and to reclaim their own lives. That night, after Michael and the kids left, I sat in my living room with a cup of hot tea and my journal. I wrote about the year that had passed, about everything I had learned, and about the woman I had become. And I finished with a reflection that surprised me with its simplicity and its truth. I spent 64 years believing my value was in what I could give to others. Now I understand that my value is in who I am, simply for existing. I don't need to buy love. Real love doesn't have a price tag. I closed the journal and looked around my living room, my house, my space, my sanctuary. It was no longer filled with the constant noise of demands and requirements. It was filled with peace, with possibilities, and with a life that was finally mine to live, as I chose. I had recovered my money, but more importantly, I had recovered my soul. And that, I discovered, was priceless. When Vanessa gave me that sarcastic smile and said it was just for the family, she thought she was excluding me, putting me in my place. But without knowing it, she set me free. She showed me with perfect clarity that I wasn't valued, only used. And that painful clarity was the greatest gift she could have ever given me, because it gave me the courage to change, to grow, and to become the woman I was always meant to be. Now, when people ask me how I am, I don't automatically say good to avoid conversation. I tell the truth. Sometimes I am doing great. Sometimes I am struggling. Sometimes I am celebrating, but always, always, I am being authentic. And that authenticity is the sweetest victory of all. My story isn't unique. I know there are thousands of women living versions of my nightmare, but I want them to know that it is possible to get out. It is possible to reclaim your life, your dignity, and your worth. It isn't easy. It is terrifying, painful, and devastating at times. But on the other side of that fear is freedom. And freedom, I discovered, is worth every tear, every sleepless night, and every moment of doubt. So now, I live for myself. I love my son and my grandkids deeply, but that love no longer costs me my soul. I help when I can and when I want to, but I no longer sacrifice myself until I disappear. And every morning when I wake up, before anything else, I look at myself in the mirror and tell myself, "You are enough, Eleanor. You have always been enough." That is my truth now, and no one, ever again, will be able to take it from me. I hope this story inspires you as much as it has changed me. If you enjoyed this, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories of strength and resilience. Your support helps us share these important lessons with more people. Thank you for listening.